Howdy folks. Today on the Pampered Bee, I would like to talk about something I wish had been brought to my attention before I acquired my first bees. You need to, in my opinion, prepare your land. Just as you would do if you were going to keep beef or goats or chickens or any other type of livestock, you have to set up your infrastructure first. You know, you're not going to run out and buy a bunch of chickens without having a chicken coop and a pen to pin them up at night to keep them safe and stuff like that. You know, you're going to have your food provision and storage methodologies worked out for your chickens. Same for goats, same for cows, and pretty much any other livestock that you get, cats, dogs, whatever. So the main thing that you have to be concerned about with honeybees in regards to provision preparation is your forage that they're going to go out and collect. If you don't have sufficient forage for the honeybees, you're going to wind up having to feed them a lot, or they're just going to starve. Feeding them is expensive. In the years that I've been keeping bees, I haven't been doing it very long, I've had to buy just copious amounts of sugar. Tons and tons of sugar to keep my bees fed, because I was not properly educated on how I needed to set my land up prior to buying my first 5-frame nuke. They did all right because it was only one nuke, but I've tried to expand even before I realized all of this, and it doesn't work out very well. It's expensive and difficult. All that being said, a few of the types of trees and plants that you can put out are things like red maple, silver maple, and sugar maple. The way those bloom is their blooming periods actually overlap. They each have about a 2-week blooming cycle, and they bloom in the order that I listed them: red first, silver second, and sugar third. And that 2-week blooming cycle for the sugar maple overlaps the red maple and the sugar maple. So after the red maple has bloomed for a week, then the sugar maple and red maple are blooming together. Red maple loses its flowers, and the sugar maple, I'm sorry, I think I said sugar maple and I meant silver. The red maple blooms. And then 1 week after it starts blooming, the silver maple blooms. A week later, the red maple loses its blooms and the sugar maple blooms. So the silver maple overlaps those two. So that's just one. Another good one is tulip poplar. Another good one is black locust. Any fruit tree, pretty much any fruit tree, apple, plum, pear, peach, crab apple, cherry, almost any kind of fruit tree you can think of is going to provide sufficient flowers for honeybees. There are a lot of other things that you typically wouldn't think of as being good for honeybees. Certain types of vines. English ivy is one of them, and English ivy grows almost anywhere. You know, rocks, trees. It doesn't even have to be a damp location. Just as long as it doesn't dry out to, you know, Sahara standards. You don't want to live in a giant dust bowl and try to grow English ivy. It just doesn't work out very well. So that's really the gist of today's video, is just prepare your land and make sure that you have sufficient forage. If you can, plant stuff that will come back every year. There's a very, very popular plant. The name escapes me at the moment. Parslane is what I'm thinking of. It doesn't come back from roots every year, but it casts seeds every year so that it will come back the following year. Comfrey is another really good one. And then you have certain herbs that you can use. Rosemary, I think, maybe. I'm not sure. You'll have to research the herbs. My focus has been on planting trees, and the reason for this is I do not have a lot of land that is sufficient for growing grasses. Things like red clover, Dutch clover, hop clover. There are a couple of other types of clover, but I have a few patches that are sufficient for growing trees. And so that's why my focus is on trees. Aside from that, trees actually, for the amount of land that they require, provide more nectar than grasses will. Grasses and, wildflowers, wildflower meadows and whatnot provide, because you have more flowers in a smaller area, up in the canopy of a tree. There are a few other, there's one other vine. Clematis is a good one. Certain types of clematis are better than others. There's one that I discovered this past fall that is really good and is incredibly fragrant. It is called autumn clematis. It has a little white flower on it, which brings me to something else that you need to pay attention to. Make sure the things that you are planting in your area are not outlawed by your state. There are some states that have what they call an invasive species list, and if something's on that list, you're not supposed to plant it or grow it in your state. For example, Bradford pear is a great tree for honeybees, and its blooming period, I think, is 2 or 3 weeks long. And I don't know if you've ever seen a healthy Bradford pear, but they are just absolutely inundated with white flowers. And I would say one Bradford pear, a good healthy mid-age Bradford pear, probably will provide enough nectar for 4 or 5 good strong hives. Now, I don't recommend you test that. My recommendation is as many trees, as many species as you can plant to overlap the flowering periods of each, like I was describing with the maple trees earlier. That's actually what I'm trying to do, is plant trees that will start blooming at the very beginning of spring and will bloom successively, one behind the other, all the way until the tail end of fall. And that way you don't have to worry so much about feeding your bees. They'll get enough nectar, and at that point, really, all things considered, all you should have to do at that point is just take care of your small hive beetles, varroa mites, and any other pests or potential diseases or things of that nature, and you should have a very good, healthy, strong apiary. Like Kamon Reynolds says on his YouTube channel, good queens, good nutrition, low mites. And I'm not sure if he says, I forget, it's been a while since I've watched any of his videos. Speaking of which, Kamon Reynolds, Barnyard Bees, Blue Ridge Honey Company, I'm not sure if that's the name of the channel or not. I'll try to link some of these other YouTube channels that I've learned from in the description under this video, and I'll see if I can put them somewhere else on YouTube. But last tip before I close out this video is, someone comes up and asks, what do I need to do to get into beekeeping? My response verbatim is, well, it's a learn absolutely everything you can about beekeeping, and it's a fly by the seat of your pants application. What works for me in my area might not work for you in your area. What works for me in my area, there's a town about 15 minutes away that they do things a lot different than I do here, just because even in that short of a distance, it's about 12 miles, the conditions are that much different than they are here. So what works for me may not work for you, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have a healthy knowledge and understanding of many different methodologies of beekeeping, because what works here one year might work in town 15 minutes up the road next year, and what they use this year might be what I have to use next year, for example. So learn everything you can, make sure that you are well prepared before you set up. Learn about the equipment, how to use it, the best things that you can use in your smoker. There's so much to learn. So, and remember, as the old saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So if you learn about it beforehand so that you can avoid the problems altogether, is worth a whole lot more than figuring out what to do to fix the problem once it arises. So until the next video, if you have any questions, ask them. I try to respond to comments. And remember, pamper your bees.